The NBA Finals is where the most important basketball on the planet is played. Fittingly, it has become the biggest factor in the GOAT debate between LeBron James and Michael Jordan. So today, I want to find the answer to the question, between LeBron and Michael, who is the better finals player? There is no one way to approach this question. That's the great part about the debate. It's also the annoying part of it. The debate is rich with nuance, and it's all subjective. When we're dealing with something that's subjective, the best thing you can do is use objective facts to support your subjective opinion. That's what I'm going to do here. I've determined that the best way to find who's better in the finals between LeBron and Michael is to look at their stats in the finals, their teammates' stats in the finals, and their opponents' stats in the finals. Looking at LeBron's and MJ's stats is not enough. Looking at their teammates' stats will tell you how much help the two players had, and looking at their opponents will tell you how strong the two players' competition was. I've come up with a very simple way to do this. In the charts I'm about to show, the red bar is MJ or LeBron, the blue bar is their teammates, and the green bar is their opponents. What I'm doing with all these players is simply adding their points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, and field goal percentages together. So for the teammates and opponents, I'm taking the top 3 teammates and top 3 opponents from each finals, adding their stats together, dividing that total number by 3, so we can get an average stat line for MJ's and LeBron's teammates and competition. Looking at MJ's chart first, let's go over some key takeaways from Jordan's finals. MJ put up better stats than his teammates on average in all 6 of his finals. He put up better stats than his opponents on average in 5 of his 6 finals, with, funny enough, the 72-10 season in 1996 being the one year his opponents averaged a better stat line. His teammates outperformed his opponents in 2 of his 6 finals, 91 versus the Lakers and 92 versus the Trailblazers. Again, the scores here are simply the players' points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, and field goal percentage added together. The highest score MJ ever got was 110 in the 93 finals versus the Suns. MJ really stuffed the stat sheet in the first three-peat, averaging a score of 107. Then, likely due to getting older, he took a noticeable dip in the second three-peat, averaging a score of 86. Overall, his average score over his 6 finals comes out to a 97. Now let's look at LeBron's chart. LeBron put up better stats than his teammates on average in all 10 of his finals. He put up better stats than his opponents on average in 9 of his 10 finals, with the 2007 season being the one year his opponents averaged a better stat line. This makes sense, seeing how that year featured a 22-year-old LeBron going up against an all-time great dynasty led by Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili. LeBron's teammates outperformed his opponents in 1 of the 10 finals, 2011 versus the Mavericks. On one hand, it makes LeBron look really good when his teammates don't measure up to his opponents in 90% of his finals. But on the other hand, it makes LeBron look bad in the 2011 finals specifically. His stat line and the average stat line of Wade, Bosh, and Chalmers were both better overall than the average stat line of Dirk, Jason Terry, and Shawn Marion. The fact that LeBron lost this series, despite the stats favoring him and his team, is a testament to the cold, hard truth. The 2011 finals is the biggest blemish on LeBron's legacy. The highest score LeBron ever got was 114 in the 2017 finals versus the Warriors. LeBron stuffed the stat sheet most in his last 4 finals, averaging a score of 110. Completely opposite of MJ, whose best finals were his first 3, LeBron's worst stats came in his first 3 finals, averaging a score of 84. Overall, his average score over his 10 finals comes out to a 98. With all of the data laid out, now we can see who was ultimately the better player in the NBA Finals. LeBron's average stat line in his finals of 98 just barely beats MJ's average stat line of 97. In fact, when you put all 16 of their final scores in order, LeBron has 7 of the top 10 highest scores. But like I said a few minutes ago, this isn't enough. It's not enough to just look at LeBron and Jordan's stats. So let's see what their teammates and opponents look like when compared to each other. LeBron's teammates in his 10 finals end up with an average score of 70. MJ's teammates in his 6 finals end up with an average score of 74. Despite the fact that LeBron averaged 8 assists per game in the finals to MJ's 6, MJ's teammates have a noticeably higher score. This doesn't necessarily prove that MJ's teammates shot a higher percentage or averaged more points or any other individual stat on its own. What this does prove is that MJ's teammates were on average better than LeBron's in terms of all of the stats accumulated. When we rank LeBron's and MJ's teammates' stats from best to worst, you see that MJ's teammates have the 3 highest scores on the list, and LeBron's teammates have the 2 lowest scores. MJ's teammates in the 91 finals were by far the best, being the only ones who scored in the 80s. LeBron's teammates in the 2018 finals were by far the worst, being the only ones who scored in the 50s. Oh, and by the way, LeBron's usage rate is not the cause of his teammates' low scores. Some Jordan fans might try to argue that LeBron's teammates only seem worse than MJ's because LeBron hogs the ball and therefore hogs the stat sheet. This explanation does not work for the simple fact that MJ's usage rate in the finals was 36, 4 units higher than LeBron's at 32. So let's get this straight here. MJ had the ball in his hand more than LeBron, and yet LeBron has the better stats. LeBron's teammates had the ball more than MJ's teammates did, and yet MJ's teammates have the better overall stats. Pace per game won't explain this either. From 1985 to 1998, the pace per game was actually higher than it was from 2004 to 2023. MJ's era had more possessions, more shots, more points, faster pace. The only explanation here is that LeBron was more efficient than MJ, and Michael's teammates were more efficient than LeBron's teammates. The stats so far are telling us that in the finals, LeBron is better than MJ, and MJ had better teammates. But maybe there's some saving grace for MJ in competition, so let's look at that. LeBron's opponents average a score of 79. MJ's opponents average a score of 78. Again, a very close comparison, but LeBron's finals opponents just barely edge out MJ's opponents. When we rank all of the opponents from best to worst, you see that LeBron has far and away the toughest opponents, Golden State in 2017 and 2018. In case you've already forgotten what happened there, in those 2 seasons, the Golden State Warriors, who in 2016 won 73 games, had 4 certified future Hall of Famers, one being the 2-time defending MVP and greatest shooter of all time, Steph Curry, one being a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, Draymond Green, one being a top 5 all-time shooter and the greatest catch-and-shooter of all time, Klay Thompson, and one being a Finals MVP and a clutch closer, Andre Iguodala. This mega team added Kevin Durant, the 2nd greatest all-around player in the 21st century, the guy who won the MVP right before Steph did. This is the greatest team of all time, and it shows. Their average score in the 17 and 18 finals is 87. No other finals opponent of LeBron or MJ's scores higher than 82. And that 82 is also a LeBron opponent, by the way. But let's look at all of the finals opponents, ranked in order. The top 3 opponents are LeBron's. 2 of the 3 worst opponents are MJ's. The top 10 opponents feature 6 of LeBron's 10 opponents. So now let's add all of this up. Looking at LeBron versus MJ, LeBron's teammates versus MJ's teammates, and LeBron's opponents versus MJ's opponents, it's a sweep. 3-0. LeBron is the better finals player. He's had inferior support, and he's faced tougher competition. At this point, the only escape for the people who just want Michael to be better than LeBron is to reject my criteria altogether. That is, to reject using the stats. So now I want to talk about why using stats is the best way to gauge the skill level of players. First of all, I'm using points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, and field goal percentage. That's just about every relevant stat that there is. I didn't include free throw percentage as a favor to MJ. LeBron's teammates and opponents overall shoot a higher percentage, and it would have made the score differences even greater for LeBron. We can't use win shares or value over replacement or player efficiency rating or any other advanced stat because the NBA doesn't measure those in the finals by themselves. All of the differences between MJ's and LeBron's eras should favor MJ's era statistically. When we compare MJ's era, 1985 to 1998, to LeBron's era, 2004 to 2023, MJ's era averages more points per game and a faster pace, yet LeBron's final stats are higher than Michael's, and LeBron's finals opponent stats are higher than MJ's finals opponent stats. And the biggest part of my scoring system is the player shooting percentages. This should favor MJ's era, because his era took a ton more two-pointers and a ton less three-pointers. This should make MJ's era's field goal percentage higher, because twos are a higher percentage shot than threes, and yet LeBron's era has the better shooting percentages in terms of finals opponents. And most importantly, I need all the people who don't think it's good to look at the stats to tell me why the NBA finds it necessary to keep count of the stats. Why do we keep track of points, rebounds, assists, and shooting percentages, and all the other stats if they just don't tell us who's better than who? The stats, hear me out, measure, try to keep up, all of the things that players do in the game of basketball. Whoever has the best accumulated score of all the stats combined is by definition the better player. Now there is a context to it. I don't think Wilt Chamberlain is the GOAT, but when MJ's era and LeBron's era are so close, so similar to each other in terms of pace, points per game, offensive and defensive ratings, at that point I think we can use the stats to gauge the players, even though it's in two different eras. This is the explanation for LeBron's 4-6 finals record and MJ's 6-0 finals record. We see that MJ had better teammates, and he played the weaker competition. That is why MJ's undefeated in the finals and LeBron has a losing record in the finals. It's not because MJ's better than LeBron, because the facts, the data, the statistics, they tell us that LeBron is better. So to conclude, the stats, that is, the facts, decisively prove that LeBron is the better player in the finals over Michael Jordan.